mainly for me, it was the access to data stuff for schools that I don't have Check and Connect mentors to having a Check and Connect mentor that's in a visible place where students feel comfortable to come see them. Because one of my schools, Check and Connect mentor is a SPED teacher, and half of the students are in that class, so she'll see those 4 students every day, but the other 4, she just maybe met with them once or twice, throughout a semester, and that's not. And some of those gen ed kids, they're not getting the supports that the SPED students are, so they're the ones that really do need that extra support in the school. And not being able to do an intervention until I'm at the school next, so having that lag time in between, and sometimes maybe it's the issues either resolved itself or it's forgotten about, and the student's like, whatever, not even dealing with that, so, yeah.
Awesome. So maybe for the next question, you can just, in the interest of time, just chime in as needed. So what are the barriers to the Dynamics database?
Entering things within 24 hours has to be, I think, the biggest barrier of all. Like, if we could, it was funny, one of the people who works here, who used to be a social worker for years and years, said that she couldn't believe that we had to do this within 24 hours. Most social workers do, like, at the end of the week, they do all their case notes. And so if we could do that, it would free up so much time in schedules. And I found myself, on the advice of a coworker, cutting back how much time I was spending with kids to get my stuff in within 24 hours, and then half of it disappeared the next day anyway. So that would be the other thing, is like Dynamics is not dependable in actually recording the data we record.
And I think for me, it's like I said to someone, I feel like I can't ever turn it off. I can turn off my phone, but I can't, because everything has to be in, and I find myself working beyond the hours. And even if I allot time for administrative hours during a regular workday, I still go outside of those hours. I mean, even up until like last night, for example, like all of a sudden we got a notice saying at 4 o'clock Dynamics wouldn't be available.
Yeah.
And then but I'm still held accountable for getting things in, or the expectation is there. So then I allot time outside of that time that I normally would do it, and I'm supposed to be done at 5 o'clock, but I'm not done till 10:30 last night, because I had to wait a few hours in between to go back and try and get it in. Information that's required within that 24-hour window to make sure I stay on top of it.
And the reason that we were initially given for the 24 hours was so that they could pull data anytime.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's reasonable expectation to put on everybody. And it seems like if you had it all due by the end of the week, well, if you want to pull data, then pull it on Monday or Tuesday of the next week. So, I totally agree that 24 hours is very unrealistic.
And I've never ever seen them pull data. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've never ever said, oh, I pulled your data from yesterday. This was all that, like, there's never been follow-up to that policy at all. Like, it feels very arbitrary. And it feels like a really big barrier all the time. And the checks are also supposed to be within 24 hours. And to me, like, the whole notion of putting a check for a kid who has a D, I'm thrilled when a kid has a D, because it means they're passing. It's like, that kind of relates to the Dynamics thing too. Just there's lots of unnecessary information, and then it feels like no one's ever, like the case notes, no one reads the case notes but us.
Yeah.
I think that's what I struggle with the most. It feels like a data dump.
Yeah.
And I feel like this could be because I'm new, but I don't know how to use the data I'm putting in well. It's not easy to access in a way that you look at it and you say, okay, this is what I need to do, this is what I have been doing, this is, it's like you put it in and then move on the next day, put it in, move on the next day.
There's not an easy, like, just summary page.
Yes.
Like in the other old system, you could just pick up, like, push in, and it would summarize, it would have all of your notes that you've ever done, and you could just read through it, like, so at the end of the semester when you're doing your student summaries, and you could just read through, oh, that's what we do all the time. Or when I'm going back for the end of the month, like maybe I'm emailing a social worker and just kind of giving them updates like that we did during the month, and I could just go back and read everything. Or before the next meeting with the student, I could go back and read like what we did the week before, and it's not accessible in that way, so I don't find that I'm writing notes like I would.
Yeah.
I'm writing notes to have something in there, but I'm not writing notes that's going to be useful for somebody to go back and read them.
Same here.
I think and I'm new too, some of the linkage doesn't work correctly, like from a lead page to a contact page, some things are not translated together, and then when you access, let's say, a contact page, it's difficult to see what actually, so you go to the interventions and it has all these letters and numbers, but there's no it's linked to something, you know what I mean? There's no hey, for this thing you've done these activities and this is what it was done, do you know what I mean? So you can link it to an intervention and an activity, but you can't see how that all worked together to help that kid. It's all very data friendly as far as grouping things together, but as far as reading in and visually looking at it from an outside standpoint, it's difficult to navigate through it and see it as a holistic program. I hope I said that properly, but.
Yeah, there's also a task bar that is supposed to be to help us sort our priorities and plan for the week, which I definitely need. But mine is so clogged with action plans that I'm required to put in so that my supervisor can confirm I'm doing action plans,
Right.
which is
Wacky.
not really what student-centered planning is about. But this tool is not useful. I'll have 70 tasks and I can't find what needs to be done today. So there's a lot of potential in dynamics that I feel like we're not benefiting from.
And I think I had asked about the taskbar, something that would actually alert you in a color zone that would let you know exactly kind of what's up, what's due up on the docket, and it's kind of color coded versus and it kind of groups it by the kids instead of they're all kind of just mixed in together. So you would know all of based on that color or who that youth is, it kind of puts them in their own box versus everybody's just all in one funnel. And because when you go to the taskbar, you literally have to go in and put in the name individually to get it. But it'd be nice to be able to kind of see when you look at your bar, even before doing anything, you can see color coded right away. You know exactly,
It was originally supposed to be linked to our calendar, so that
Yeah.
things would pop up on our calendar, but that linkage never happened. So it's not really very useful to us because most of us will go off our calendar and not go off this little taskbar in a whole nother application. So.
Yeah.
And I heard that's happening, but the task's going to be linked, but it's just going to be task. It's not going to be multiple things accessible through
There's a whole
Dynamics.
bunch of stuff in Dynamics that we're supposed to be able to use that we can't use. So for instance, when we're recording interventions, we have to record almost everything under a phone call. Because if you try to do it under email, it actually sends the email, and if you try to do it under appointment, it actually makes the appointment. It's supposed to the whole point was that we were supposed to be able to use Microsoft as a suite and link Dynamics to our Outlook and make it all work, and that's why we had the Windows phones, and none of that's happening. And so we're supposed to be flexible on our end about what works and what doesn't work, but when we say Dynamics in 24 hours doesn't work for us, we don't get any kind of flexibility, and it's really frustrating.
I think we've been saying that over and over for the past year, 24 hours is not reasonable, and every time we say that and every time we have a group or a get-together where they say, what would be really helpful, and every time throughout all the ed specialists, we're always saying it is not doable to do it within 24 hours, and then every time they come back and say, we heard you say that, and we're not going to do anything
we don't
about
care.
it, sorry. So it's,
Without really an explanation why.
yeah.
Right, it's still very arbitrary for us. And the other thing is that supervisors are able to pull information about our caseloads that we can't. So how many hours a week we're spending with kids, how many hours we spend on a given kid, that would be incredible information for us to have, because I have kids who contact me all the time, so I'm spending more time on them, and it would be nice to know, I spent 10 hours this month on this kid, but only 1 hour on this kid, and but I want to be able to pull that information myself and not wait for my supervisor to have a conversation with me about it, because then it feels punitive instead of me being proactive.
and trying to manage your own self.
It would be nice to modify the dashboard a little bit personally, to make it look like I want it to look. Do you know what I mean? Because just for instance, the task thing is so small and it's in the corner. So you have to be intentional about pulling it up or popping it up into a new window and accessing it that way. But it would be good to individualize it to your needs for instance, that would be a good table to have, is a running total of, hey, you hung out with these 10 kids today, but you missed these 2 kids the whole week last week. So
Right.
now you need to, those may be the first 2 kids you touch on next week. And those kind of, but those would be very specific needs that you have and maybe not that 10 other people have. And so that ability would be nice. And I don't know how that would
I need
happen.
that.
Yeah.
And I
No,
think
that
the
would be
other
huge.
piece, just I'll add one other thing, it's just like, how much time, like within a 24-hour period, how much time you can spend on one kid or one situation, or something that's completely removed almost from the kid, but it's still indirectly related to the kid, because you can't really work with the kid until you deal with that piece first. Something has to come before that. And I think that also makes it very difficult within a window of 24 hours of something that isn't really complete yet. But it's-
Ongoing things.
Yeah, it is very ongoing. And
Like
so-
reading an IEP
Yes.
or doing research on something.
Exactly. It's gonna take much more time than you can even, I mean, this may be drawn out for a week, it may be drawn out for 3 days, and then, you know, coming back, and yes, you can save it and come back to it and add, but I think it'd be nice to kind of have the flexibility, because no 2 situations are ever the same. And if we're operating on 15 minutes per student, some students require more than 15 minutes, more than 20 minutes, and certainly whatever comes up, and I know I've had a caseload this year that was wacky as ever, and it was beyond, out of my control. I mean, there was nothing I could do, but I realized certainly there were requirements that I still had to meet, but it just seemed unrealistic at times, just because circumstances are always all over the place.
Awesome. So next, what are the barriers to student-centered planning?
We don't have flexibility anymore to meet their student-centered plans. I feel like there's so many, we used to have barrier funds and all these other easily accessible ways to help them meet their student-centered planning when it required something of us. And I think a lot of that has been taken away, or there's so many barriers to getting to funding or access to tickets or bus tokens or like whatever we might need to help them support their student-centered plan. And there's so many barriers to that it makes it so that we're not really able to facilitate it as well for them.
Yeah, I think we probably have like doubled the amount of time we're doing referrals
Yeah.
within the year, like.
Well, and they get denied so many times
I know.
too.
Yeah, or it's like you have
Okay.
to request it in a certain way, or.
And on hard copy, and you have to have 3 signatures for that, and then you have to turn it in actually physically to the Treehouse building when we all work off-site, and so it's just, it takes so long to be able to get anything for students to support their student-centered plans.
And the nature of kids is that they're gonna tell you a day before they need something that they need it, and it takes 3 days for us to get anything.
Yeah.
If we're like 3 days, and I work in the area of Treehouse, so I can come and pick up a check, but for,
I come on Wednesdays.
right, exactly, for field staff are here once a week. And I think with student-centered planning also, it's like, sometimes kids have really, really big stuff going on. And it doesn't, like, what's happening in their lives, they're not in a headspace to be able to do student-centered planning, and I think as a responsible adult who is in their lives to help them, you don't always want to you don't want to steer the conversation away from what they're feeling or what they need. I'm not saying this very well, but I think just, it's like, oh, you got removed from your home yesterday, let's talk about student-centered planning. It just doesn't make sense, and we're expected to do advocacy also, and so if you have 15 to 30 minutes a week with a kid, student-centered planning isn't always going to happen the way you would like it to.
I think it's excellent for some students when it's the right time. For some other students, I don't feel like it's the right time, and so to push that on them is not student-centered necessarily. It's what we want them to do at the time.
I also think it would be helpful to have some clarity, because my understanding at times is that would be student-centered planning, is to talk about what's going on with them at home, how can I support you, that is like student-centered.
But then
what
when they ask
want.
what their goal is, it's to not,
But I do think that there's some misunderstanding, I just think it would help if they clarified that, because like, I would put stuff like that down as an action plan if it has to do with their, like, I feel like those connections make sense, and I don't think that has been clear to other people, because it seems like action plans are like, I don't think that anybody is not doing action plans, and the fact that that number is so low tells me that there's a misunderstanding of what constitutes an action plan. And that just seems to be very like different across the board, across teams, across people. And either I'm making, either there's people making connections that shouldn't be being made,